Yes, so thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Darshita and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Atri Labs. Today I'll be speaking about how to, what it is like to build a full stack web development framework. This is something that we have been building for the past 8 months or so, and we went through a lot of iterations because there is no such resource around how exactly to build one. There are so many resources on how to use an existing framework. So I thought, why not share our experiences, our lessons so far, and also, yes, to share our experiences so far, and also because it's really early days for us, like in terms of our framework. So it's also a good point in time to step back, take a look at what we have learned, and to share it with other people who are interested in web development industry, in full stack, in software engineering in general, and also open source, and building a startup, and so many themes. So yeah, let's get started. As I mentioned, Deepa already gave a wonderful introduction, so I'll go through this really quickly. I'm the maintainer of the open source project, which is a new full stack web development framework. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of the company that's behind this project. My journey to web development industry has been a bit unconventional. After studying engineering from IIT, I worked in quant finance, and then I moved to academic research at MIT. I was working on an idea with my current co-founder at the time, but it was more like a side project when we stumbled upon this idea that became what we now call a three-engine, a full stack web development framework. And so we dropped out of our graduate programs, and basically I dropped out from MIT to work on the startup full time. I'm also doing a lot of interesting personal projects on the side. So as Deepa mentioned, I'm editing a series of novels that my grandfather wrote over the last 5 decades. So that's a lot. And he, just today, basically, we got the news that one of those books is ready for publication. So it seems like that's also moving along nicely. So really happy about that. So yeah, basically, so the way I've structured this talk is in the next 30 minutes, I would like to cover 4 topics. One is giving you an introduction of what we are building, so introducing Atri Framework. But this is to contextualize the discussion that's going to come forward. So the second section that this would lead us to is the motivation. Like, why did we think that there is need for a new framework? And then third is going to be a longer session on what were the lessons we learned. What did we learn about web development, the web development ecosystem? Sorry. What did we learn about web development ecosystem? What did we learn about the JavaScript world, TypeScript world? How to think about developer experience when you're creating something that's going to be used by other developers to create, production grade softwares. And fourth, because we are also in the middle of Hacktoberfest, and because this project is free and open source, it would be the fourth topic that I would cover is how to contribute to open source. So this would be more from a maintainer's standpoint. So just for your context, if some of you aren't really aware, maintainer is basically in the open source world the admin of the open source project. So they have to think a lot about how exactly people are going to find this project, how they're going to use it, what's their experience going to be like, how do we actually help them when they stumble across any problem or any issues or any bugs. So there is a lot that goes into it. So this talk is going to be more like a 360-degree view into what the early days look like when you're creating a framework. My hope is that all the participants could take away, their key takeaways would be how to think about open source projects, how as contributors you can think about what the maintainer is trying to do in their in all the things that they're doing in their repo, and also about how to, like, the second takeaway could be that you understand more about web development, you understand more about all those things that have already been done in web development ecosystem and what are the things that are upcoming. So with that, let me quickly introduce what we are building. So as I mentioned, this is a full stack web development framework. So our view is that we support we support building front end through two modes, either visually, which means like using this visual editor that you see on my screen here, or by writing React code. This framework is built on top of React, so we support React at the moment. And for building the backend for your application, you can write it in Python, you can write it in Node.js, the support for which is upcoming. But we are basically, our view is that front-end development is easier if you do it visually, but we don't want to take away the power to code away from developers. So that is why we came up with this dual system that works for the entire product team. That you can write as much or as less code as you want, depending on what your level of comfort is, depending on what your exact need is, depending on how frequent the task is. So you can plan all that by using a framework like this. Some really cool thing about this that I'll also discuss a bit in detail in just the next slide is that the request response model. I already talked about the fact that this is free and open source. From our end, we provide a lot of existing applications that you can directly clone and get started with, or you can create one from scratch. And the third is more around what you can actually build using this framework. So my answer to that is that it's a general purpose framework. So you can build everything from heavy e-commerce websites to internal apps that maybe you use for data science or machine learning, because you can write the backend in Python. Okay, so I get this question a lot, and my team as well gets this question a lot, that what makes this framework unique? Because there are so many different frameworks that exist, and people need to be clear on what exactly we are offering and what are our key value propositions. So the first is that it extends beyond JavaScript world. That itself we feel is a very, very big value proposition. The fact that you can write backend of your application in Python or Node.js gives a lot of flexibility. It gives a lot of power to people who come from different paradigms and different coding paradigms. They have different levels of comfort with the languages that they're using. Also, it comes packed with a lot of productivity tools. So the visual editor that I showed you in the last slide, it's one of the productivity tools. So you can still write, and if you choose to, you can still write your code entirely in React and your backend in Node.js. But we feel that we can actually make front-end devs a lot more productive if we can give them the power to build front-end visually. And that is why we introduced this Atri editor. Along with it, there are many repeatable, tasks that we have to do for each and every project. So, that's why we introduced asset management tools. So things like image optimization is something that we always have to, as web developers, we always have to worry about. So how can we make that easier so that, again, it's something that we abstract away. You still have the control if you want to, like you can take over just how it's in autopilot mode, like it will automatically be happening if you don't want to care about it, but you can take over if you want to steer it in a specific direction. Another really cool thing that when I tell people about it, people are always, amazed that this is something that could even be happening, which is that in this full stack framework, you don't have to create or manage REST APIs. And this is because of the request response model that I mentioned in the previous slide. So this is one of our key, technical innovations in that, in the sense that you don't need to write a REST API and also document that REST API, manage the communications between the front-end team, back-end team, and so on. Because if using this framework, you only have single source of truth and you directly manipulate the object model. So if that object model has been modified, then everyone, it's not like it's been modified for the backend team, but not for the front-end team. That's not possible. Like everyone has access to one source of truth. And this also helps in making us, this also helps us framework creators in ensuring that it is compliance ready. So because there is a single object model, we can build guardrails so that there are no compliance related breaches. So an example would be that, say, if you're not using Atri Framework, you have to basically ensure that your backend team does not mistakenly send user-sensitive information to front end, because that is something they can do, right? And you have to, be very vigilant about it. But because of this technical innovation that we have brought in, it's not possible to do that. Like even if your backend team tries that I'm really, really interested in sending this sensitive information in the front end, it's not possible. They have to jump through a lot of hoops, and then they basically have to, it's not possible to do it by mistake. They have to jump through a lot of hoops, and they have to kind of ensure that they have an awareness that they are, trying to do it in the first place. So that was like, we talked about the framework that we are building. The key motivation for both my co-founder and I, among many technical challenges that we had, that we were very excited about, was this, that we wanted to extend web development to the entire product team. So say you have, in your product team, say you want to run a specific marketing campaign, and the marketing folks, say it's handled by, say you have dedicated marketing folks, or say it's a product manager, they want to have control around, and they want to basically edit exactly what banner appears in the website. The current process is very circuitous in the sense that you have to go through your web development team, you have to, get them on board, you have to, ensure that they are not working on any other project, they are fully available and fully committed to working on this campaign that you want to embark upon. So it becomes really difficult because everybody else in the team might be like, they don't get a chance to experiment. They are always dependent on the the web development, the front end development team. So we wanted to build a framework that comes from this core motivation, that web development should be possible for the entire product team. Of course, how much they want to do and how like in what form they want to interact with the development process, should be up to them, but they should all lie and work in one single infrastructure. So if you need a new asset for running the marketing campaign, then a web developer shouldn't worry about exactly how good the banner looks. That's the responsibility of the design team. They do it in the same place as the web developer is adding a new asset to support this campaign run, and the marketing team is worrying about the copy, like exactly the text that appears on that marketing banner. So basically, that's the essence of our motivation. So, okay, so I talked about what we were building, what we are building. Sorry. I talked about what we are building. Now, I would like to share what we have learned in the process. What are the technical lessons that we have had? So, this is roughly the journey of developing a framework. So you first have to understand the tools. Next comes understanding the past and future of JavaScript world, especially if you're creating a framework in JavaScript. Third is building a design philosophy around your framework. Exactly what are the goals that you want to achieve? What is going to be your core value proposition? And exactly how you are going to achieve it. The fourth is deciding your bundler and transpiler. And fifth is when development actually starts. So there is a lot of work that is, in industry parlance, technically the job of an architect before you actually start the development process. And even this is very iterative because you might feel like the design philosophy is locked in, but as you start development, you will make your own development decisions themselves, right? So you might have to come back and rethink your design principle. So like basically re-architect it. And that is what happened with us as well. Like we realized that some of the development decisions we made would limit us in it would basically prevent us from providing that another feature that we wanted to provide in future. So we had to come back and rethink this entire cycle again. Okay, so one of the things that we used for design philosophies was referring to React's design philosophy itself, because firstly, because we wanted to build a framework on top of React, and secondly, also because it's a good, it's been around for a long time. It's a good, good piece of engineering in itself. So in terms of tools specifically, we didn't. I shouldn't say that we didn't realize the importance, but I think when people usually think of a framework, when users think of a framework, they quickly start to think in terms of like their expectations are around, does it provide abstraction? Are there helper functions, components, SSG, SSR, etc.? And many of these things are taken for granted. Many of these tools are taken for granted. So for example, users are not really thinking about, how is this particular framework handling different JavaScript syntax, and they're not really thinking about how this framework is handling different JavaScript syntax and TypeScript all in one code base. So when you shift from a user mindset to a framework builder mindset, that is some of the bias that you carry as well. Another thing that gets ignored often is how are we as framework users even able to import non-JavaScript or non-TypeScript files in these JavaScript TypeScript files? So for example, how are we able to import image files as string URL, SPG as React component, etc.? So these are some of the things that have become de facto standards for good developer experience for any framework. And all these features are made possible by tools such as compilers, linters, bundlers, transpilers, and formatters. So this is like when we were thinking about building a framework, we also had to think about, what is our exact choice of linter? What should be our, like depending on our requirement, which bundler we should use, which transpiler we should use, and so on. Okay, so the next thing is that rendering on the server side is a common requirement for most of the frameworks, if not all. So when we were designing our framework, we had to support React in both browser and Node.js. In other words, it was crucial for us to realize the difference between different module types, especially ECMAScript and CommonJS. And coming back to some of the tools that we discussed, this was one of the toughest decisions, deciding your bundling in terms of architecting the framework. When we think about what bundler and build tools to use, we mostly, like, a first instinct is to think and compare in terms of how fast they run. But as a framework creator, we might have to think in terms of what our design philosophies are. What are the value propositions that we are trying to achieve? Like, what kind of framework are we trying to build? For example, if the developer experience entails code mods, then you might prefer something like Babel over ESBuild, because Babel exposes AST to the loaders or plugins, while ESBuild doesn't. So if you have a general discussion with any software developer in this field around what bundler they use, they might have a very different answer. That if you want to, you must use ESBuild because it gives you a fast build experience. But it might be a different thing when you're thinking about, like, you might have different criteria to compare these different bundlers when you're thinking of building a framework. And so in our case, we use Webpack with Babel. So we have a plugin system, and to support that, we had to use we had to make this specific choice. So resources such as manifest schemas and plugins, they refer to each other. And for example, a manifest has to refer to a manifest schema for runtime type checking. So to improve the developer experience, we had to go with this choice. And lastly, in terms of understanding and framing the design philosophy, I wouldn't say that it comes naturally. Like, you might start with a few pointers, you might start with, and that evolves into like a very detailed plan around exactly what you will build. But it's always helpful to look at what has been done already. So, sorry. And I'm, as was mentioned in my intro, I love reading history. I love art history. I love military history, and I also love software history for that matter, software engineering history for that matter. So we decided to, refer to create React app repository as a starting point, because there were many things that there are so many things that you have to give to developers that are common across frameworks. And they are not necessarily things that you're innovating around, because they are basically, maybe they are industry standards, maybe they are things that have already been innovated upon. So it's always good to look at what has been done in terms of understanding exactly how you will do it in your own framework, but also in terms of, understanding the finer points around how this repository has been structured, why they made this specific choice, and so on. So and this is our final topic on some of the technical lessons that we learned, which is while reading create React apps specifically, there were different kinds of packages. So we decided to pick them apart and categorize them into three buckets. One is packages that are used for building CRA. Second is packages for configuring tools. And third, packages that they use for generating template. Even if, this is something that I want to highlight, that even if you are not maybe a framework creator, or even if you are not so much keen on understanding framework in that level of detail, I think you should still, as front-end developer, you should still read create React app repository. You should still read the React official documentation, because these are the things that pull you from, that push you from intermediate to advanced level of engineering, in terms of knowledge, in terms of your own understanding around why this was done in a specific way. So it's, as front-end devs, I think the aim is not just to create websites, but to get more and more familiar with the good work that has been done in the industry. So I think this is especially a good place to get started with. So this is so in I know we are just on time. So my co-founder is giving a more detailed talk on some of the things, some of the technical challenges, and some of the lessons that I mentioned in this talk. But if you're interested, you can follow his talk that's on 24th in React Advanced Conference. We'll also be sharing the talk recording of that particular presentation, so you can you can give it a listen if you're interested. Last section that I wanted to cover was more around how to contribute to any open source project. So for that, let me go to my repo, and I'll use this as an example. But my intention here is to show you how a repo is structured. What are the things that maintainers want you to take a look at? What are the things maintainers themselves have to be more aware about, so that they do a better job of explaining exactly what they're building. And again, this is still work in progress. As I mentioned, it's still very early days. It's been exactly 2 months since we open sourced this. So we are still doing a lot of changes, making a lot of improvements. But yeah, this is like most open source projects are live on GitHub. So I think as developers, most of you must already be spending a lot of time on GitHub. But if you're not, definitely it's a place where open source projects, personal projects, all of these reside. So when you open any repository, then you see a bunch of things here. The most important is this stars. So actually, I should correct myself there. Not the most important, but one of the most important metrics is stars. So whenever you visit any repository, and if you like what they're building, even if it's a personal project, if it's sponsored by a company, make sure that you star that repository. The reason is twofold. First is that the project, the more the stars a project has, the more the incoming people get the sense that there is some external activity happening here. It's not just limited to this particular person or this particular org. There are people who are, looking at this project. There are people who are interested in what is happening in this entire space. So that's a way of, supporting a project owner and a project. from maintainer standpoint, it's a way of showing to incoming devs that, like there is social proof that people have liked it a few times. The next thing to note is the README. In README, people usually add a lot of badges that link to different activities that are happening. So one common badge that you'll see in many repositories is good first issues badge. So what this means is that these are the issues that have been picked by maintainers as good fit for newcomers. So we understand that there is it's very difficult to read somebody else's code, let alone contribute meaningfully. It's very hard, for example, to like read your own code on Monday if you wrote something on Friday. So it's completely understandable, and that's why good first issues are specifically picked, that if someone is interested, they can pick any from this list, and they can start working and they can contribute. There is also the downloads badge, especially for younger projects, because again, that is a better way of showing that there is a lot of activity, and there is always more people use it than they remember to start it. So this is also a good metric to kind of add in the project rating. The other things are, answering common questions that people have when they visit the project. So like, for example, what can I build using this framework was an important question for us. Giving examples of websites that have been built and deployed using this framework was an important question. So we added that. How is it different from other frameworks was again an important question. Getting started is always an important question for any maintainer to add, because you always have to, you're assuming that if people have come till this place in your README, they have at least been, partially interested, and they want to get a sense that if they want to take it on a test run, how much work is it going to be from their end? So if there are only 3 steps, then they know that they can try it in a few minutes. This is really interesting section, and I'm very passionate about this. It's also Hacktoberfest, so I especially wanted to dedicate time to discuss this. So most open source projects have some form of this section, which is how you should contribute to their project. In our project, for example, we have listed many different ways in which you can contribute. And the reason why we have done it is because whenever I would, for example, talk to people and ask if they're interested in contributing, they would always assume, like, the first instinct would be that they'll have to contribute via code. And framework itself, building a framework is a really big undertaking. So they would always be unsure if they can make a meaningful code contribution, if they will have the time to do it in first place. So we decided that we would list all the different things. So even asking a question, submitting a bug report, like it's especially when your project is in early phases, you need all kinds of contributions. It's helpful if people can, say, request a new feature, if they can suggest something that maybe you already have in your roadmap, or maybe you haven't really thought about it. If they can suggest ways to improve the experience of using an existing feature. If they can even submit a documentation report. So say a contributor comes to my repo and they follow the getting started steps here, and they follow this written guide, which basically takes them to our docs, and they find that there was something that was not clear, or maybe there was in their specific system configuration, there is need for additional information in the documentation. So sharing that with project owners is again a very, very good form of contribution, and it's looked as a really valuable contribution from maintainer standpoint as well. This can be different for projects that have matured. So projects that have been around for, say, 6 years, 7 years, they're already being used by many, say, enterprises. And they already have a very, very big list of things that they have to work upon and features that they have to prioritize. And also, there's a clash between the features that they have to prioritize from for the open source community versus the features that they have to prioritize for their paying clients. So they don't seek these kinds of contributions usually. But I personally believe, and this is the view that I share with many people in open source community, that in early phases of your project, it's always helpful to encourage these kinds of contributions. This is also helpful from contributors' standpoint, I believe, because it feels less taxing, I would say, to take a framework for a spin and maybe find a bug and submit that bug report, rather than doing a really difficult task in doing a really difficult web development task and contributing it to the framework so that everyone can use it, right? So we wanted to encourage that, and that's why you see a big list here. And this is just the snapshot. There are other kinds of contributions that are listed in this link, and we try to make it a point that any kind of contribution, code or no code, is welcome. So in Hacktoberfest, if you're interested in contributing to any repository, you can, like when you're picking which particular issue to work upon, you can think in these terms as well, that like the first hurdle is to convince yourself that you will contribute. So if you realize that the barrier is not that big, it's not that you have to understand somebody's code base and contribute code, then I feel like it becomes a bit more manageable. Also, this is something that all of you may be already aware, but let me just reiterate. If you, it's usually from recruiter's standpoint, it's a really valuable point in your resume if you have made an important contribution to open source. And that's why many people are becoming more and more active now. They want to show, the reason why it's important is because open source projects, they are more general purpose, and framework becomes even more general purpose. So in general, around open source, the sentiment is that it will require, if you are making a contribution, you must have good coding skills. You must know, you must have known how to use GitHub, for example. You must have known how to handle issues, how to submit PRs, how to get them merged, how to work in a team when a PR reviewer is telling you to resolve specific changes, and you come back with those edits, and then you resubmit. And finally, when you do all of that, then you are listed as one of the contributors. So that's one of the that's why it's looked and treated as a good skill to have. And that's why when beginners have done enough of their personal projects, this is the second thing that they look at, because this is what differentiates them from people who are coding in isolation and building their personal project. Last thing that I want to mention here is the contributors section. So in many repositories, you might have seen different specifications around whom they recognize as contributors and whom they do not. So until maybe like 1 or 2 years ago, there was this practice that anyone who contributed code would automatically appear in GitHub here in this section as contributors. And they are the only ones who would be recognized. But now there is a general sense in open source that people are realizing that there is a lot more that happens beyond code. So we should get better at recognizing those people who are, trying, for example, trying a project and asking a good question, or maybe suggesting a good idea, or maybe suggesting a bug report. So for example, this person, they pointed out something like they were using, I believe, they were using a specific CLI, a command line tool that we had built, and they had Windows 32-bit, and like we hadn't really tested that tool in that specific configuration. So that was a valuable point for us to know, and that's why we recognize them here. Like that's why we have the name. That's why we have the hyperlinks to it. So anyone who visits our repo can know more about it. So that's the point. So you can, when you're thinking about open source contributions, you can also like, and you're confused between two projects and you're wondering which project you should choose to contribute. You can compare them through this lens as well, that do they follow an all contributor specification, or do they only care about code contribution? So if they only care about code contribution, maybe my submission of bug report isn't really going to be that valuable, and I'm not going to be recognized. But especially for projects that are in their early stage, this is something that's valuable from both standpoints. From maintainer standpoints as well, it's valuable that we are able to, for example, show that there is a lot of activity. I have to, for example, add, there are 46 people listed here already, but I have to add another 10, 15 people, or maybe more, who were really active last week. So like from maintainer standpoint, it's valuable that we are able to show that, there are a lot of people who are not just using it, but also contributing back. And from contributors standpoint, it's valuable because they are able to show that, they are an open source contributor. And there is one more way of reaching them. So if you want to, you may have never heard of this person, but you can now, if you visit our repo, you can, go to their GitHub profile and get a look at what they are doing beyond this, beyond contribution in this project. So that's all I wanted to cover. I know it's been a lot, but I hope it was helpful in some regards, at least, to everyone who attended. I will stop my screen.
Darshita, thank you so much. There's a lot of questions that are coming in, and I'm still new for all the attendees here. I'm so sorry. I'm new to this Zoom, platform as a host. So I'm trying to understand this whole thing and how this Q&A or the host and panel. I was told that all the questions should go in host and panel. So, okay, I have a set of questions that I would be going and asking you. First question is from Sherry. Where did you get the name Atri from?
Oh, this is really cool. So, I'm sorry, I'll give a longer answer to this. So we were picking, when we were naming the company, we looked at Greek mythology. I was also reading Homer at the time. I was reading Iliad. Yeah, I was reading that. So I was basically going through all the different names that we could have picked, but a lot of them were already taken. Like, for example, Prometheus, I really like that name, it was already taken. So a lot of that happened, and then we decided that we also needed like there was this additional criteria that it needs to be shorter, so that when you write create a Atri app, it's not like create Prometheus app, that there are so many ways of misspelling it, right? So with this additional criteria, and with not having any success finding a name in Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Norse mythology even, I decided, why not try find a name in Indian mythology? And that is something that I should have started with, but I'm going to be honest that that was not my starting point. I come from India, I studied here, so definitely that was something that was on my mind. So Atri is one of the, like when we think about Hindu mythology, he was one of the, like he was one of the Saptarishis. I'm not sure if you guys are aware.
Sages, but, basically, one of the sages.
Yeah, he was one of the sages who basically codified a lot of values and practices around Hinduism. And he was also someone who, like in Hindu mythology, all these values are codified in Vedas. So he was one of the most prolific contributors to Vedas, Rig Vedas specifically. And one of his, among many lessons that he tried to impart through how you live your life and around spirituality in general, one of the things was patience. And that really stuck with me, because we realized that we are taking this really big undertaking of building a full stack framework that has front end, that allows back end, that also allows deployment. So we realized that we had to be really patient and in getting to a stage where we are comfortable that we have built what we wanted to build. So that's how this name came along.
There you go. You have your answer, Sherry, for what is it? I was asking my husband this morning. It's like, is it Atri or Atri?
It's the first one, actually.
I'm sorry?
It's the first one.
Right? Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have another question. Can you also post that GitHub link to people, because they're not able to see the font size on the browser that you showed us?
Yes, sorry about that.
And
I wanted to increase the size.
It's okay. We can, if you can. Guys, you have the GitHub repo. You can read it to yourself. She just scrolled through and she just mentioned everything. And the second question is, will you give a high-level point of view of what Atri is, or what it's supposed to do? So it is a framework, guys, like Darshita said. I think this is the whole, if you have worked with other frameworks, that would make a lot more sense. If you want to add more on to this, Darshita, that will be great.
Yeah, I think you explained it well. What I would add is that generally, especially in the JavaScript world, the definition of frameworks has been like, so there have been many front-end frameworks. There have been a few upcoming full stack frameworks. Our framework is different in the sense that we also come with a lot of productivity tools, such as visual editor, asset management tools, etc. Another key technical innovation is in the fact that you don't have to write REST APIs to like communicate any information from your backend to your front end. So it's it's one of the things that when I first heard about it, I found it really cool, and I still find it very cool. I hope you guys I think one of the things that I would like to point out is that whenever you hear about a new framework, it might be difficult to fully contextualize exactly what can be done through it, even if there is a lot of information. Even if I, for example, or my team provides a lot of information. So one thing that I can recommend is go through the repo, go through the resources that are listed there. Try out if you're interested, you can try out building a small application. And actually creating the first Atri app is one of the first things that comes up after you have finished installation. So try that. I think that will give you a better sense of where we are in terms of our journey, exactly what can be done. And I think you can get a few pieces of, I think you can get a sense around where we will be working more. So that's there. We also have Slack channel. We're active on Slack. We're active on GitHub. You can reach me in Women Who Code front-end Slack workspace as well. So I'm available for any further questions or concerns that you might have.
Yeah, just to add on to this, because a lot of people are still thinking that, okay, if you can create projects in vanilla JavaScript with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? That's your own project as your project, or if you're just building out your personal project, that's good enough. But if you are building a large enterprise kind of application, then you would need either a React library or an Angular framework or anything like that. So it depends on if you understand how these frameworks in general, like I said, React is mainly the front end, or it's mainly for the UI stuff, but Angular is much more full-fledged. You can do front end as well as on the server side. So this is a same concept that that Atri Labs is trying to achieve with progressive web apps, right? So we don't this is just for progressive web apps and not exactly like building your websites with just with other frameworks. If you want to build something that is compatible for native applications, you can do that with progressive apps. And this is what is, this framework is trying to achieve that. And I find it really cool because I really love the progressive web app. And so I hope this somebody asked me one more question on the Slack. I'm trying to see. Oh yeah, how is Rust used in framework?
How is Rust used in this framework? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Because Rust is not used in this framework.
Okay, so that answers your question. And I'm trying to see, as a student, what coding languages do I need to be proficient to use Atri Framework? Atri Framework.
Sure. So I think CSS is, in terms of front end, CSS is the most important one. For if you want to create static sites which have no backend, then you can just you can just use your knowledge of CSS and you can spin out personal blogs. You can spin out similar static websites, and you can also deploy them through like one command that we have, which is Atri build SSG. So it deploys it directly. If you want to also write a backend, then you can either write it in Node.js or you can write it in Python. So these are the three things that you would need depending on how much you want to achieve in your project.
Okay, somebody is asking, can I contribute to this project? I would like to volunteer. So you have the GitHub repo. If you're somebody who's new, start with the first issues or first commits, or that would be a best place to start. I'm trying to see what are the other questions. Okay, Sherry asked me something on, I'm trying to see, I'm trying to scroll over. She asked something about ECMAScript and JavaScript, especially correcting. I'm not so sure. Okay, I'm trying to. Sherry, can you just please post this question? Okay, how do you spell the other one? Python and?
I'm just responding to Mary.
Oh, yeah, she said about Node.js and Python. Node.js is
like
a
either or. Yeah, either or. You can like use. Currently, we are supporting Python, but we are also going to support Node.js in the upcoming releases.
Okay, so I think, is there anything else? Oh, no questions for me at this time. Okay, cool, thank you. Is there any other questions for Darshita? we are about time now, but if you have any other questions, please do reach out to Darshita on Slack.